Imagine a woman who spent 25 years telling other people where they could stand, where they could park, and what rules mattered, suddenly finding herself in a room where her voice carries no special weight at all. The morning courtroom hums with the familiar shuffle of boots on old floorboards, the smell of lacquered benches warmed by decades of bodies, and the soft clatter of folders sliding across the clerk's desk. People murmur about work breaks, babysitters, overdue tickets. Routine. Predictable. Nothing unusual. Until the door opens. She steps in first, tall, composed, moving with a measured confidence usually seen in news conferences, not municipal court. A structured navy blazer, pearl studs, sunglasses still on as though the fluorescent lighting is beneath her. The crowd recognizes her before the clerk even says her name. The police chief's wife. Her entrance changes the whole temperature of the room. Conversations taper off. A few older men fold their arms. A younger woman whispers, "Well, this should be something." Behind her, half a step back, comes a much younger woman, the daughter-in-law. Shoulders drawn in, clutching her bag too tightly, eyes darting from the judge to the public seating as if expecting someone to leap up and accuse her. The contrast between them is jarring, one carved from cold marble, the other trembling porcelain. Judge Caprio watches them approach the podium. His expression stays neutral, but his eyes sharpen, not with annoyance, but with that quiet, practiced attentiveness he reserves for cases that arrive wearing a mask. Hearing their names, he begins the routine opening, "You are here regarding 3 citations for." Before he can finish, she lifts a hand, not aggressively, but dismissively, as though waving off a restaurant server. "Let's not waste time, Judge. My husband is aware of all this." A slow ripple moves through the benches. Someone exhales with a dry laugh. Another person mutters, "Here we go." Caprio lowers the papers slightly, not breaking eye contact. The charges, simple on paper, now feel oddly heavier, 3 separate instances of parking in a disabled zone outside the city hospital, each on a different day. The fines never escalated. The notices never reached a hearing until now. A pattern with neat edges, maybe too neat. The younger woman shifts beside her, almost flinching at the tone. The judge notices. He continues, calm but firmer, "Ma'am, state for the record how you plead." She doesn't hesitate. Doesn't blink. With the same cool composure she used walking in, she says, "We decide what's fair in this town." The room freezes. Not a cough, not a shoe scrape, not even a breath. Caprio looks at her for a long moment, not offended, not startled, but as though a puzzle piece has just clicked into place. And that's the instant everyone realizes. This isn't a parking case anymore. Something much larger just walked into the room with her. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Judge Caprio lets the silence settle before he asks, gently but deliberately. "Ma'am, before we go any further, tell me a little about yourself." It is the last thing she expected. This was supposed to be swift, procedural, the kind of hearing she'd breezed through before. She tilts her head, puzzled, as if he asked something inappropriate. "There isn't much to tell," she replies coolly. "I support my husband's work. I handle our household matters. That's all you need." But beside her, the young woman, her daughter-in-law, bites her lip hard enough to whiten it. She hesitates, then whispers, barely audible. It wasn't all for her. "Some days, she drove me." Every gaze in the courtroom lifts toward her. Even Caprio's posture softens by a fraction. The older woman stiffens, shooting a sharp glance as if trying to will the words back into silence. But the dam has cracked. The young woman gathers her courage. "After the baby, I needed physical therapy. I couldn't walk far. She took me to every appointment." A ripple of sympathy moves through the room. For a brief moment, the older woman appears almost human, but the feeling doesn't last. Caprio flips through the documents again, lingering on one date circled in red. "This day," he says, tapping the page. You were parked at the hospital's disabled zone while the police department was conducting a major operation downtown. It was all over the news. The older woman's jaw tightens. A muscle near her temple twitches. Yes, she says too quickly. That was another appointment. The younger woman lowers her eyes. Caprio studies both of them. Were you with her on that day as well? A long pause. A painful swallow. No, she finally admits. That was the day we argued. A soft murmur spreads through the benches. Something in the air shifts, the beginning of a story unraveling. The judge turns back to the older woman. You were seen on camera leaving your vehicle, but you didn't enter the hospital. You walked across the street. Her composure falters. The veneer of control thins. She speaks quietly, but the room hears every syllable. I wasn't going to wait 40 minutes in line for blood work. I had things to do. A few older spectators shake their heads. Not angry, disappointed. Caprio leans back, hands folded. Ma'am, you told me earlier that you came here only to expedite this. But fairness doesn't live in shortcuts. For the first time, she looks small, not in stature, but in certainty. Something she'd held tightly begins to loosen. And somewhere between the rows of worn wooden benches, the listeners start seeing not just privilege, but the long shadow it casts. The courtroom falls silent again, but this time the quiet isn't awe or irritation. It's anticipation. Caprio turns a page, pauses, and looks toward the clerk. Let's hear the officer's summary for each citation. The officer stands, clears his throat, and reads the first two violations in a steady, neutral tone. Straightforward. Time-stamped. Routine. Then he reaches the third. He hesitates, just long enough for everyone to feel it. This one is different, Your Honor. He lifts his eyes toward the defendant. She shifts in her chair, folding her hands together as if bracing for impact. The vehicle was parked in the disabled zone for 47 minutes, he continues. Hospital logs show that no one matching her description entered the building. A stir moves through the audience. The daughter-in-law stiffens beside her, fingers tangling nervously with the strap of her purse. That must be incorrect, the older woman says quickly, almost dismissively. Equipment malfunctions all the time. Caprio doesn't respond. He only asks the daughter-in-law, quietly. Were you with her that day? Her breath catches. It's a single moment, small but decisive. She looks down at her lap, smoothing a crease that isn't there. No, she finally says, her voice unsteady. We weren't speaking then. The temperature in the room seems to change. The listeners lean forward, not out of judgment, but recognition. Family fractures are universal. Caprio nods once, then turns to the clerk again. Play the exterior clip. A grainy video appears on the courtroom screen. The older woman's SUV pulls into the disabled space, stops with practiced confidence, and she steps out with her handbag swinging lightly at her side. She doesn't even glance toward the hospital entrance. Instead, she crosses the street toward a cafe. A low rumble of whispers fills the benches. Her face drains of color. I was just getting coffee, she mutters. I didn't think. That is precisely the issue, Caprio says gently. But it isn't over. The officer adds, almost reluctantly, there was also a complaint call from a passerby. They reported a vehicle with a police access placard misusing a disabled space. He holds up a small sheet, the complaint record. A timestamp. A stranger's voice describing her car. The audience goes still. Not tense. Not angry. Just silent in the way people become when they realize a pattern isn't an accident. The older woman's back straightens defensively, but her eyes flicker toward the exit, a brief, involuntary glance suggesting she'd leave if she could. Caprio notices. He leans forward slightly. His tone remains calm, but each word carries weight. Mrs. Collins, this isn't about a parking ticket. It's about the choices we make when we believe no one is watching. Her breath catches, barely, but enough. The daughter-in-law looks at her with something between concern and sorrow. The judge continues, softly. And today, people were watching. The room holds its breath, waiting for what comes next. The courtroom door opens with a soft scrape, and a man steps inside, a tall, stooped figure with a weathered coat and a cane that taps steadily against the tile. His presence alone quiets the room. Judge Caprio looks up, surprised but welcoming. "Sir," he says gently, "are you the individual who filed the complaint regarding the disabled space?" The veteran nods once. "Yes, Your Honor. I heard the case was being heard today. I didn't want trouble. I just needed the space that day." His voice is calm, almost apologetic, but the weight of it settles over everyone like a heavy blanket. Even the air seems to hold still. He approaches the front, each step punctuated by the soft thud of the cane, an honest sound in a room full of defensiveness. Mrs. Collins watches him approach. For the first time since the hearing began, she doesn't straighten her back or adjust her jacket. She simply freezes, her certainty evaporating. The veteran continues, "I came to the hospital for a scheduled treatment. One I'd waited months for. But when I got there, the handicapped spot was taken by a car with a police pass in the window." A murmur spreads through the benches like a draft. The daughter-in-law's eyes widen, she glances at her mother-in-law, searching for an explanation that doesn't come. "I circled the lot twice," the veteran says. "By the time I found a place, they had already taken the next patient in. I had to reschedule. Weeks of waiting, gone." The older woman pales. Her lips press into a thin line, as if she could hold back the consequences with silence alone. The daughter-in-law whispers, barely audible, "You told me you were just picking up groceries. That you didn't stay long." Her voice trembles, not with anger, but betrayal. A small, painful fracture in a family held together by appearances rather than truth. Mrs. Collins finally speaks, but the words collapse as soon as they leave her mouth. I didn't think. That," Caprio says softly, "is precisely the concern." He looks at her not with scorn, but with a quiet firmness that cuts deeper than raised voices ever could. "This gentleman," he continues, gesturing toward the veteran, "did nothing but follow the system you assumed would always bend for you." The veteran bows his head slightly, not triumphant, not vindictive, just dignified. His steadiness makes the contrast unbearable. Her composure begins to slip, her hands tremble as she tries to fold them neatly on her lap. Caprio lets the silence do its work before he adds. "Mrs. Collins, we have crossed into something far more serious than a parking violation. This is about the people who bore the weight of your choices." Her eyes flicker downward. A long breath escapes her, a surrender of the certainty she once carried like armor. And in that moment, the room understands. There is no path back to the version of this story she walked in with. Judge Caprio returns to the bench with a stack of documents, thicker now, heavier, as if the truth itself had gained weight in the last few minutes. He begins flipping through the pages, the rustle of paper echoing in the silent room. "Officer," he says calmly, "please read the extended report." The officer steps forward and clears his throat. His tone is steady, but the information is anything but. "Your Honor, one of the violations occurred during the police department's charity banquet." He glances briefly at Mrs. Collins. She was the guest of honor that evening. The room reacts with a sharp, collective inhale. Even those who tried to stay neutral can't hide their disbelief. The officer continues, "Her vehicle remained in the handicapped space for the entire duration of the event, approximately 2 hours. A low rumble spreads across the benches. This wasn't about pain, or medical urgency, or helping anyone. It was convenience, plain and unapologetic. Judge Caprio lifts his eyes toward her. "Madam, that evening, were you also assisting your daughter-in-law?" Her silence is instant. Then, barely above a whisper. "No. That day, it wasn't for her. The daughter-in-law lowers her gaze, as if hearing confirmation of something she feared but never voiced. Her fingers twist nervously in her lap. Caprio turns another page. "Mrs. Collins," he asks gently, "did your husband know about these violations?" She breathes out slowly, defeated. He knew some of them." A wave of murmurs washes through the room, older residents shaking their heads, younger ones whispering about the weight of influence. It is the sound of a community realizing the pattern wasn't accidental. But the turning point comes from the quietest voice in the room. The daughter-in-law rises, hands trembling slightly. "Judge," she says, I asked her many times not to use that police pass. I told her it wasn't right. And she told me. Nobody touches our family." A stunned silence follows. Even the air seems to stop moving. Mrs. Collins' face crumples, not dramatically, but with a subtle collapse of certainty. The sentence that once felt like protection now sounds like a confession. Caprio exhales softly, not angry, not accusatory, simply disappointed in a way that cuts deeper than scorn. "The law," he says, pausing so every word lands, "is not a family privilege. It is a public trust." The veteran, still seated near the front, nods slowly, acknowledging justice not as punishment, but as clarity finally spoken aloud. Mrs. Collins lowers her head. The armor she wore so effortlessly when she entered is gone. Her daughter-in-law's honesty has cracked the last layer she hid behind, leaving her exposed, not humiliated, but human. And for the first time, the courtroom isn't united against her. It's united around the truth that brought them all here. For the first time since she entered the courtroom, Mrs. Collins asks to speak. There is no steel in her voice now, only a quiet strain, the kind that comes when pride finally loosens its grip. "I thought I was protecting my family," she says, eyes fixed on the wood of the defendant's podium. "But I see now that I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just closing my eyes to the people I hurt." No one breathes. Even the usual courtroom creaks fall silent. Judge Caprio leans forward, fingers interlocked, expression steady and compassionate. "Mrs. Collins," he says gently, "justice is not about punishing you for punishment's sake. It's about making sure we understand the weight of our choices." He pauses, not for effect, but to let her steady herself. "You could have been fined the maximum on each violation," he continues. "But fines alone will not teach the lesson that needs learning." A ripple of curiosity moves through the audience. "So here is my decision," Caprio says, voice firm but warm. "You will pay your outstanding tickets. But more importantly, you will complete 20 hours of volunteer service at the hospital's Veterans Unit." The reaction is immediate, a soft shock, a breath of relief, a nod of approval from those who came seeking fairness, not vengeance. It is a sentence crafted not to break her, but to realign her. Mrs. Collins' shoulders drop, less in defeat, more in understanding. She whispers, "Thank you, Your Honor," with a sincerity that wasn't present in any of her earlier words. Then something unexpected happens. Caprio turns toward the young woman beside her, the daughter-in-law who, with one trembling confession, shifted the direction of the entire case. "And you," he says kindly, "keep reminding her of what you reminded her today. Honesty strengthens families far more than influence ever will." The young woman nods, eyes glossy. She wasn't expecting to be addressed, let alone encouraged. Mrs. Collins glances at her, and for the first time that morning, there is something like humility in her expression. "Would you come with me when I volunteer?" she asks softly. The daughter-in-law nods again, this time with a small smile. A gentle murmur of approval spreads through the room. Judge Caprio leans back, offering the final words of the day, words that settle over the courtroom like a closing benediction. "Fairness is not what we claim. It is what we practice when no one is watching." The veteran taps his cane once, quiet, respectful acknowledgement. People rise slowly, not out of spectacle but from the sense that they've witnessed something meaningful. Mrs. Collins leaves the courtroom differently from how she entered, not above anyone, not untouchable, but finally able to see her own reflection.